last week, I listened. I listened to what was said. There was somebody who requested that Beth wear a costume, and look, I answer requests. I am wearing a costume. Unfortunately, I'm not gonna be able to wear it the whole time because it's really hard to talk about serious things when you've got like Darth Vader on. So, guys, we are here this morning and you have muffins, which is phenomenal. Those look really good. We are in the middle of this series where we have been coming together because we want to really understand like where our church is at. Where are we? Who are we? And where are we going? And last week what we did was we sat in these groups, and in case you've missed it, we sat in these groups and we kind of asked a couple key questions to try to figure out where we are. And the reality is that we can't figure out who we are or where we are unless we've looked into the past, unless we've looked at the things that have given us total life in the past. And so we took an opportunity to ask some questions about Clarksburg Church. What made you feel most alive? What made you feel most motivated? What made you feel the most excited about being a part of this church? What do you value most about this church? What are the best features of the church? And then each of the groups that we were in, you guys kind of made 3 wishes for the future. Now, we wrote all of that down, and over the course of the week, I invited people, whoever was interested, to come back on Tuesday night and kind of dig through some of that stuff. There were 10 people who met on Tuesday, and we looked at all of the papers. I mean, we hung them all up, and we combed through them, and we looked at them, and we tried to figure out what are the reoccurring themes that keep coming up again and again and again. What are the things that keep coming up that are emerging out of this messy hodgepodge of stories? So we went ahead and we figured out, okay, it looks like there's about 11 themes that seem to be emerging, and then we took those 11 themes and we rearranged them and reordered them and put them in about 5 different categories. Now I'm gonna show you these categories, but I want you to know that they're not official titles, they're not refined titles, they are messy and they're awkward, and some of them have not real words in them. And that's okay, but this kind of is going to give us a framework. I didn't want to refine them too quickly because I wanted them to stay a little bit messy so we can keep working with them. So here are the 5 themes that are the parts of our church that give us life, that give us vibrancy, that we're excited about. The first one is that we eagerly embrace all people. This kind of idea, not just that we like welcome them, like, hey, I'll be willing to meet you, but I loved this idea that continued to emerge that we actually run to new people. And we're like, hey, what's your name? Who are you? You want to come for lunch? Right? Like there's sort of this idea that we are eager to have new people. We're accepting of new people. We're forgiving. We don't think that you need to have all of your junk together. Instead, we're like, no, whoever you are, wherever you've been, you are welcome in this place. So that was one theme that sort of emerged. The second theme that emerged was sort of this role, this missional role and purpose. Over and over again, people told stories about how they loved serving, they loved engaging, they loved going on mission trips and outreach projects, even the fundraisers and sales that they were a part of that we used to do when we were Lakewood Church, that came up again and again. There was sort of this come in and gather together in order to go out, that we need each other to energize and refuel each other to be able to send each other out. Another theme that came up was the importance of engaging with all generations or people in the context of their specific needs or life stage. That's a really long one. But here got paired all of the ways that we engage our children. We don't want to shove them off in a dark corner. Instead, we want them to be a part. We want them running around. We want them engaged. We want the best things for them. But it's also the way that we want student engagement. We would love to have a vibrant student ministry, and we miss when we had one, the time when we had one. There's also this understanding that we want to see the sick and the elderly taken care of, that there's a point of connection for them, that there's visitation happening for them. But also that there are groups and Bible studies or small group gatherings, midweek connections that people can belong to as part of connecting at every stage. The fourth theme is this worship and message theme. There was a lot of talk about worshipful music, that there was good music. We like Beth's teachings and the other speakers that are there. And so that was another theme that we saw arise. And the fifth one, which was a very strong one, was this idea of growth. And we paired it together with growth and baptism. That it seems that the baptism services are something that people got very energized about, and that there is a desire to see our community grow. So these are kind of our 5 different themes, and I have them in a slide so you can see all 5 of them at the same time. These are kind of our 5 themes. Now, what we want to do is we want to dig deeper into these themes. We want to really understand the reason they're not in refined titles or categories is because I want to make sure that we don't move too quickly to pigeonhole them into one specific thing. I want to go back and I want to understand more about what it is about these 5 things that we really love. And so what we're going to do this morning is we're actually going to do an interview style thing. All right, so in your groups of 4 or 6 people, you're actually going to get in groups of 2 or 3 people, and you're more than welcome to spread out around the room if that's more comfortable. But what you're going to do is in your pairings or your triads, you're going to have one person be the interviewer. And they're going to ask the interviewee to share a story in one of each of these categories. All right, the interviewer is going to ask more questions and try to get a clearer idea. Now, there's pens and paper on your table where you're actually going to write down some bullet notes of their story. It's not going to be verbatim, that's fine, but some real key bullet notes of their story so that somebody else that wasn't sitting there can actually have an understanding of what that story is. Now, if you are like, I hate pen and paper, you could whip out your iPhone, and there is a voice memo app. And you can record them, and then you can email it to info@clarksburgchurch.com. And that can be a totally different way to do it. And some of you are like, I don't even know how to do that. That's okay. That's why I got pen and paper. So we got technology and non-technology. We're accommodating of all ages and generations in the context of their specific needs and life stage. Look at that. Already doing it. Okay, so you can do it either way that you want, but then you'll have an opportunity to switch. Now, I think to make sure that you have enough time to get both people's stories out there, I would do sort of theme 1. One person's the interviewer, one person's the interviewee, and then switch. Now, this is not only a way to get those stories down on paper so that the team can see them, but this is also going to be a really life-giving thing to have us connect with each other. That's why it would be really, really great to sit with somebody or interview somebody who you don't already know their stories, or maybe they're in a totally different generation than you that you would never connect with their stories otherwise. All right, so we're going to take some time to do this. We're going to go back and forth until each of you have recorded or told about 5 stories. And if you can number the stories on your paper, so the story that connects with theme number 1, write that as number 1. Do we have any questions about what we're doing? Yes? What are the questions I want to clarify? I could probably find 2 clipboards. I'm aware of the location of 2 clipboards. So Jackie, you can have one of them. Okay. All right, so you're going to split up. I'm going to go ahead and let you go now. You are going to have about 15 minutes to 20 minutes to do this. All right, you guys ready? What's that? Yes, can you put the 5 themes back on, Lindsay? All right, there they are. So split up in your groups. You can switch locations. You can spread out more. Pair up. Yes, one more time. Sorry, guys. You're going to get in a group of 2 or 3. Okay. One person in that small group is going to play the role of interviewer. And you are going to say, hey, tell me a story about when you saw or witnessed or experienced this church eagerly embracing all people. And be as specific as you can. Like pick one story where there was one you know what I'm saying? Not a general, well, we always just welcome people. Like a really specific story. Tell that story. The interviewer is writing it down or recording it. Got it? Ask some questions, get some more information, and then you'll switch. Then the other person will say, tell me a story about when you witnessed or experienced eagerly embracing all people.
So Beth, we don't each have 5 about 5. We don't have 25 things for recording.
No, you're in groups of 2. So if it was you and Russell, then you would listen to and record 5 of Russell's stories, and he would listen to and record 5 of your stories. Does this make sense? Okay. Is it coming together for you? No, it's 5 altogether. It's 1 for each of the categories. Yeah. And again, I'd encourage you to be with somebody who you don't know or is in a different generation than you, if you can. You good? All right. All right. Now we're really going to transition. All right. So I hope you had an opportunity to share lots of stories about these different things. And so I'm going to ask a question, and we can kind of pass around the mic. If you can remember to kind of condense your answer, and that'd be great. But I'd love to hear, were there any stories that came up that you feel like we as an entire group need to hear an abbreviated version of that story? Are there any stories that came up that you feel like the entire group needs to hear? And you can share it with somebody. You can have somebody else share it. You can share it.
Yeah, I'm glad to share. Okay. In our small group, can you hear me? Maybe even without this. We recognized how important...
Oh, can you say your name?
Oh, I'm so sorry. My name is Linnell Wolf.
This is my mother-in-law.
Best mother-in-law. Yeah. I'm one lucky mother-in-law, let me tell you. But how important it is to have small groups that include people from several generations, that the young people have a lot that they can learn from the older folks, and the older folks have wisdom that only comes with age. And so we really feel it would be important to encourage and establish some small groups that meet cross-generational.
Yeah.
And coming one service has made that a little more possible, because you see people that you wouldn't normally see if you were in 2 services. And I know, speaking for myself, but the ladies here also agreed that when we've been in a small group where you have older folks as well as those younger, you can really feel the enthusiasm and grieve with the changes of life that these young ones bring with raising children and getting jobs and moving and things. But the older folks, man, they have hard-won wisdom that they can really encourage those young people in their faith.
Yeah.
So
it sounds like the story that was told was really how we brought, how the one service kind of creates this opportunity to do this. And that was the experiential story that happened where that was learned. Okay, great. Thanks. Anybody else want to share a story that you feel like came up that everyone maybe needs to hear? All right, great, awesome.
So we kind of combined question 1 and 2, or
Great.
topic theme 1 and 2. And the experiences, I think, overall were missions and culture across the spectrum. There was a time where the church had an African-American pastor that was a different perspective for people to see, to be led by somebody from another culture. There was a period of time where the church shared services with a Chinese ministry, where there was worship, and then a Chinese pastor would give the message, if I'm capturing that correctly. And then there was some time of missions that came up again as another topic. That the experience just showed a very powerful love that the church was able to give to Guatemala, to the Indians, and not necessarily that just going there was the experience, but being able to love and be loved and accepted by somebody else, I think.
That's great. I didn't know any of that stuff. Thanks, guys. All right, anybody else have stories you want to share? Yeah, John.
So we had an interesting story how, embracing all people is that, everybody who comes through this church is coming with a life experience, whether it's good or bad. But, some people have a lot of hate in their heart. And We had a story of how one guy came into a fraternity group and was just hating a certain group of people. And it turned out, he kind of ostracized a lot of people, but ended up years later admitting that he was actually a part of that group of people, and where the people actually embraced him, where he was fearing being ostracized himself. The fraternity group embraced him and forgave him, and they now have taken broken relationship and healed it. So I think that was a really powerful story.
Yeah, that is. Cool. Thank you. Any other stories that you feel like the whole group could benefit from? Yeah.
First of all, I have to introduce our group because you guys probably don't know us. This is Hunter, Da Vinci, Stephen, Lulu, and Thor. We have renamed ourselves so we remain anonymous. But the reason why I asked to stand up is because obviously I have a granddaughter who's in middle school, and I really, really, really want her to have a Club Rock experience. And a few things that we shared in our group was about how much that meant to our young people. My two sons who are not here today are still here because of that Club Rock experience, and I just think it's really important. Daniel shared a story about whenever they built a shelter, like a homeless family would do, and how it even impacted his life, to know how blessed he is to have a roof over his head, etc., and how it even was printed in the paper about this youth group that built this homeless shelter as if they were a family looking for shelter. And I just think experiences like that build children's lives, young adults' lives, and I just think we really need to search for a way to find that for our up-and-coming youth.
Great, thank you. Great. All right. Last call. Any other stories? All right, then I have another question. How was this experience for you to listen to each other's stories? What was this experience like?
Hi, my name's Cami. I've been coming to the church since about July of last year when Dave and I closed on our house just a couple blocks up the road. And it was quite an experience. For me, we came to the church and were really welcomed by you all and got into a community group right away, which was awesome. But today it's been really interesting because sometimes you can just come in and you meet the greeters. And I've always been one. I've been in the church. I've been a Christian since I was 6 years old, been to probably 20 different churches because I moved around all over. And so I'm kind of the person that just comes in, listens to the sermon, and leaves as fast as I can. I mean, it's a goal of mine to see how fast I can get into the car at the end of a church service. But I'm an extrovert, and I'm a social butterfly, and I love talking to people. It's just super strange. Anyway, yeah, Dave's nodding his head. He's like, oh my gosh, like you pulled me away from conversations, and we don't even have anywhere to be. I mean, it's incredible. But like these conversations are ones that I can't have because I decide to come in and out. And it was really nice to have this morning to talk to different people because we all have over our years had similar experiences at different churches, from 5 people in the congregation to 2,000 people in a congregation. So it was really good that we could really relate even though we come from different backgrounds.
Thanks, Cami. Anybody else want to share? What was it like to have these conversations? What did you experience? Yeah.
I think what's interesting about having these conversations is that you realize that really we all carry around, every single person walking this earth has baggage. Mm-hmm. Every single person on this earth is broken, some horrifically so, some necessarily not horrifically so, but we all have, and it really is nice to be able to have honesty and vulnerability and acceptance for that fact. And the fact is that to know that God loves David just as much as he loves me, despite my faults, despite his faults, and therefore we should love each other the way God wants us to love each other.
That's beautiful. Thanks, John. Anyone else? I'm being so generous today with the mic. You know? I know. Somebody on this side of the room. It's like your worst nightmare, right? All right. Well, guys, what I want to do, that was really, really great, and I'm excited about listening to the stories. If you wound up recording them on your phone, you can send them again to the email address info@clarksburgchurch.com, or you can leave your papers on the table, and we're going to collect those at the end so I can read through them and just understand a little bit more about what are the things, the stories that give life to the people in our church, so we can figure out where it is the next step we need to go. We want to take a step that is a life-giving step, not a drudgery step, not a fearful step, but one that comes out of the confidence of knowing these are the things that have brought us life in the past, and so we will move forward in that same direction. And so I'm really, really excited about that. Now, to close out our time together, we're actually going to take communion. Now, typically what we do when we take communion is we either have communion available for individuals to take by themselves up front, or we'll pass the trays around, and still as an individual, you'll kind of take it, but we'll do it together. Today, we're going to take communion actually in our small groups, in the group that you are sitting in. And it's interesting because I oftentimes think that when we think of communion, we think of it as a very solemn and individualistic experience. We think of it as like me and my own taking communion right here. I'm serious and I'm quiet, but sometimes I reimagine the story of the Last Supper, where Jesus gathered around his disciples and they ate that final meal together, at the end of which Jesus breaks the bread and passes it out and says, "This is my body that has been broken for you." And he takes the cup and he says, "This is my blood that has been poured out for you." I oftentimes wonder if maybe that wasn't as solemn and individualistic as we often think it is. Sometimes I wonder if before he passes the bread and the cup, it actually may have been very similar to this. Stories of, hey, do you remember when Jesus went up to Andrew, who was sitting under a tree, and said, "Hey, come follow me," and Andrew actually did it? Do you remember when, Peter, you said, "Hey, call me out on the water. I want to walk on the water. I want to walk on the water." And then Peter got out and he did it? Do you remember that time when Jesus took the fish and the loaves and he fed tons of people, and we were eating those leftovers for weeks? Do you remember when there was that crazy guy that was possessed by a demon and Jesus said, "Get out," and he just sent him into the pigs, and the pigs ran off a cliff? Do you remember that? I wonder if that meal was more similar to that than we think. More similar to the experience you just had than we think. This opportunity to remember and to share stories with one another. See, in the process of eating a meal together, in the process of sharing stories and memories, I think it begins to shape community. It begins to reform a people group. See, a powerful thing can happen over meals. Over and over again, Jesus uses meals to recreate community. He uses meals to lay the foundation of his mission. Now, it seems like a lot of pressure to put on a meal, but think about it for a second. In the Old Testament, who you ate with defined your community. Who you ate with was really important. And so, in fact, a good Jew would say, "Ooh, Taylor, you're not a good Jew. You can't eat with me. We're done," right? They would say those sorts of things. And it wasn't so much that it was a rule that a Jew couldn't eat with a non-Jew. It was more so you just didn't, because you might break other rules. And so it created all these barriers between people. But then one day, Jesus, when he's walking through Jericho, he sees this little guy up in a tree, because this little guy named Zacchaeus wanted to see Jesus. And Zacchaeus was a tax collector. No good Jew would be eating with Zacchaeus. But Jesus sees him in the tree, and he walks right up to them. And in Luke 19, it tells us that this very peculiar thing happened. Jesus actually looks at Zacchaeus and says, "Hey, aren't you going to invite me to your house?" It wasn't just that Jesus wanted Zacchaeus to come to his place, to come to his territory. Jesus goes to Zacchaeus and says, "Hey, aren't you going to invite me to your house?" And Zacchaeus amazingly says yes. Now, with this meal, Jesus is redefining who is acceptable at the table. He's redefining the community. Those who were accepted into the community were no longer the pious ones. They weren't the ones who were well put together, who had all their I's dotted and their T's crossed. They weren't the ones who had good jobs. The ones who were accepted at the table weren't the ones who took daily showers. They weren't the ones who had obedient and perfect children. The ones who were accepted weren't the one who had no record or drug problem. The ones who were accepted weren't the ones who had figured out how to adult, and they weren't the ones who were free from mental illness. Instead, the ones who were accepted at the table, the ones who were invited in, were the ones who said yes when Jesus said, "Hey, can I come to your house?" They were the ones who said, "Yeah, my house is totally ill-equipped and unprepared and not clean, but absolutely, Jesus, come in. Come into my house. Come into my life." Those who were welcomed at the table were not the ones who had it all together, but the ones who were falling apart. The ones who were accepted at the table were not the ones who had arrived, but they were the ones who were still traveling. The ones who were accepted on the table were not the ones who were acting well, but actually acting badly. The ones who were accepted at the table were not the ones who were right, but the ones who were confused and wrong. The ones who were accepted at the table were not the divine, but they were the human. And so if I've described you in any of those categories, you have been accepted and invited to the table. And that's what we want to do today. At the side of the table, we are called to confess and admit the sins and the ways that we've been found guilty of forgetfulness and betrayal and selfishness and pride, and all the ways that we are called to willingly accept Jesus to come in. And in doing so, Jesus is also laying a foundation for his mission. We have sat and we've eaten with Jesus, and in that moment, after sitting and eating with him, we all of a sudden see the world clearly. It's not divided into us and them. It is merely us all, because we have all been invited to the table. We can look at the right and the left, the people sitting right around your very table, and you can look at them and you can say, "Hey, Jesus wants you at the table." Now you're going to do something really corny. Turn to the person to your right and your left and say to them, "Jesus wants you at the table." He wants you at the table. And he wants the persons to your right and your left, no matter how much they annoyed you maybe in the conversation you just had. He wants them at the table. See, God's mission is to bridge gulfs between people and people. God's mission is to build bridges between people and God, and what he does is it happens at the table. He invites all to come in, and once you've received that invitation, you are free to invite everyone else you know to the table, not just the people you want, but everyone else. See, it's a powerful thing that happens in a meal. So we're going to do communion now together in your small group, and there are some directions, so you'll need to pay attention. In just a second, I'm going to invite the band to come on up, and they're going to play us, some music for us. You're going to have one person from your group go to the back table and grab a loaf of bread and a cup of juice. You'll bring it back to the table. And you are actually going to serve each other. You can pass it around and serve one another the cup and the bread. And you'll use this phrase, I've put it on the slide so you won't forget it. As you serve them the bread to the person next to you, you will say, "This is the body of Christ that has been broken for you." And as you serve them the cup, you will say, "This is the blood of Christ that is shed for you." And you'll take a piece of that bread, you'll dip it into the cup, and you can eat it. And then take it, pass it to the next person. "This is the bread this is the body of Christ that has been broken for you. This is the cup this is the blood of Christ that has been shed for you." They'll take a piece, they'll dip it, they'll take it, they'll take both elements, and they'll do it for the next person. So you'll go around in a circle and you'll serve each other communion. And then you will pray together. You can hold hands, you cannot hold hands. If you're germaphobes, that's fine. Do what you need to do. But you're going to pray together in your groups, and one person can pray aloud. But if nobody wants to pray aloud, I have a prayer for you on the screen. And this prayer will be up, and you can have one person say that prayer and read it for everybody else, or you can all read it together. However you want to do it. The whole time the band will be playing, and I'll come up when I sense that everybody's kind of prayed and had their time together, and I'll pray for all of us. Did I do a better job with explanation, with instructions? Pretty good? All right, let's go back to the other slide so that they can see that one. All right, so band, would you come up right now? All right, while they're getting in place, you can go ahead and grab your bread and your cup. One person is the getter. And we'll do this.